So the main purpose of the presentation is to summarize some of the research we've done on the relationship between employment and health in HIV. I'm hoping to show you that employment is good for health, but also that you need to be healthy enough to maintain and sustain, to find and sustain employment. I'm also hoping to show you that there are characteristics of the work environment, the job quality part on the title, that also has a potential impact on health. And the general idea here is that the better the jobs, the better the health outcomes resulting from it. Or the flip side of this is that bad jobs might be as deleterious or as detrimental to health as no jobs at all. Those are kind of the key messages. So work is a defining experience in people's lives. We spend about 40% of our waking hours at work. And these are some of the ingredients that are thought to be responsible for the health benefits associated with employment. Besides providing an income, participation in employment imposes a time structure on our day, compels regular contact with people outside our immediate families, connects us with larger goals than transcend our own, defines people's identity, status, and position within society, and also enforces regular activity. This is a cross-sectional study that we conducted looking at the relationship between employment and health-related quality of life here across the street, Sean's lab at St. Michael's Hospital. This is from participants referred to a clinic that conducts psychological evaluations. So the average participant here is probably a little bit with more advanced disease than the average person living with HIV in Ontario. But the average person here is, most participants are middle-aged, unemployed, highly educated white men. And after adjusting for clinical and demographic covariates, we found that employment status was strongly associated with both physical and mental health, with almost 7-point difference for physical health and over 3-point difference for mental health, favoring the employed participants over the unemployed. And just to put this in context, a difference of 2-3 points in these scales, this is the SF-36, is usually associated with a 15% increase in the risk of being hospitalized in the subsequent year, or comparable to the disease burden of serious illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, or arthritis. So this is just to say that these are not only statistically significant differences, but also clinically meaningful as well. This is another study that we did using data from the multi-center AIDS cohort study in the US. This is one of the largest cohorts following men who have sex with men in North America. The majority of this sample is, again, highly educated, middle-aged, non-Hispanic white men. This was a longitudinal study where we had an opportunity to look at employment transitions and what is the health impact of different employment transitions. The window of observation for this study was 10 years with biannual visits. So there's a potential total of 20 visits here. So we had a lot of longitudinal data that this cohort allow us to look at some interesting things. So these are what you have on the slide are the different employment groups that take into account their employment trajectory. So over the course of the study, 41% of the sample remain continuously employed, which suggests a low rate of labor force participation for men living with HIV. There's usually, it's very difficult to compare data that comes from samples of people living with HIV relative to population health studies or census data, because it's like comparing apples with oranges. But consistently we can find that there's roughly a 20% employment gap between people living with HIV and the general population. So this is a gap that some of that may be justified, but some of that is also related to barriers in disability policies and income supports and things that we should actually be doing something to have an impact on. A quarter of the sample, 25% of the sample, remain unemployed for the duration of the study, which is quite high. 9% of the study the participants lost their jobs in the observation period, and only 4% went back to work, which seems really low. And this comes after there's previous research that has looked at this issue and has suggested that physicians and people living with HIV should actually carefully consider the decisions to leave the labor market, because once you leave it, it's very difficult to get back into it. So it may be a challenge to come back. And that process, the decision-making process that takes place between people living with HIV and clinicians, I think there's a lot of, there's an avenue there for us to try to understand what's going on there. This is the final models for physical and mental health. And again, I just wanted to emphasize a couple of things here. The first one is that the employment was associated with both physical and mental health as well, in a way that is also clinically meaningful in a longitudinal context. The other finding is, as in the previous cross-sectional sample, the differences of employment on physical health are greater than for mental health. And this, to us, suggests that there may be an adaptation process taking place to the experience of unemployment that is more salient in the mental health component of quality of life. And this issue has not been studied in the literature with the general population. Some studies have suggested that once people suffer a significant setback, like losing a family member, being involved in a divorce, or becoming unemployed, that they may recover to baseline levels over time, but other studies have not found that to be the case. We did another systematic review looking at the effects of going back to work on healthy working age adults, non-HIV populations, and we found one study that suggested that look at this issue in some detail, and they found that people, usually unemployed people, go back to baseline after a couple of years. So it may be that long that it takes for the adaptation to being in unemployed. That may be the window that for people to get back to where they used to be before the experience of job loss. This graph summarizes the health trajectories of a subset of participants in the MAGs. Those who return to work are in blue, and those who lost their jobs are in red. The vertical line on the left-hand side of the graph is the clinic visit when there was an employment transition, when the job loss group went from having a job to not having a job, or when the return to work group went from being unemployed to employed. So we can see how both groups diverge in physical health scores around the time of the employment transition, with the return to work reporting better health than the job loss group. We also found preliminary evidence suggesting that men with HIV who suffer poor physical health may experience deeper declines in physical health due to job loss compared to those who are generally healthier to begin with. So this finding is really preliminary. It requires further investigation, but those in better health seem to be more resilient to the negative impact of job loss, and we need to look into this further as well. So up until now, we've been looking at the simple distinction between employed and non-employed. So we haven't been looking at the quality of the work, simply because that's the data that we had available so far. But now, the problem with those analyses that only look at the distinction between employment and unemployment is that these studies these positive results may leave the impression that any job is of benefit to health. And we know from research in the general population that that's not really the case. There are certain characteristics of the work environment that have an impact on health. So not all jobs are created equal, obviously. So things like job insecurity, high psychological or physical demands, low decision-making authority or skill discretion, how much say you have into how you do your job, low social support from supervisor or from co-workers. All these are issues that have been shown to be related to health in a number of other general population studies or other disease conditions like cardiovascular disease, musculoskeletal disorders, low back pain, mental health issues. And this is something that is being looked at in other conditions, but not in HIV. For the first time, we have finally data to look at these issues. These are some of the examples of the items that we use to look into these different constructs. So we had an opportunity to look at these issues. It's a CIHRRC-funded longitudinal study specifically designed to collect extensive data on the labor force experiences of people living with HIV. We call that ECHO, for Employment Change and Health Outcome Study. And we've been following over 500 people living with HIV for 3 years. across Ontario. This comes from clinics and from AIDS organizations as well. The recruitment is quite broad, and we have reasonably good representation, regional representation for Ontario. The majority of them are gay, Caucasian, Canadian men with relatively high levels of education and low incomes. However, relative to other samples, we feel that we have enough variety, enough diversity among the participants to be able to look at different subpopulations as well. We're hoping that we'll be able to do that. So the first thing we did was to look at the sample of employed participants within ECHO, and that is those who are currently working in the formal economy, or those who are working for taxable income. That's our definition of employment. We're trying to see if we can influence policies, and therefore our definition of employment is those who are working for pay for taxable purposes. These are the results of the multivariate analysis looking at the relationship between psychosocial work conditions and depressive symptoms. We found that out of okay, so I'm talking about the other slide. Here it is. Out of all the psychosocial work conditions, there are 3 of them that are mainly related to depressive symptoms in this case. So decision authority refers to the degree to which somebody has the authority to make decisions regarding how the work is done and to set the schedule for completing work activities. Job insecurity not only refers to how stable the job is perceived to be, but also refers to the prospect for career development and promotions, for example. And the psychological demands refers to how hard people work, whether there are organizational constraints on completing tasks, and the presence of conflicting demands that interfere with people's ability to get the job done. Those are general definitions of these 3 psychosocial work conditions in general. So the next thing we did was to try to bring back the rest of the participants, the ones that were not employed. And in order to do that, we created a variable that is an employment continuum variable that took into account these 3 significant psychosocial work conditions as adverse work conditions. So so that gradient went from optimal employment to the left of okay, so I'm again talking, I'm way behind here. Sorry about that. You should stop me when I'm talking like this, but that don't make any sense. Coffee. All right. So the optimal employment on the left are those participants who are employed with no adverse work conditions. So there was nothing of didn't have high scores on job insecurity, on decision authority and psychological demand. So they were reasonably, we call it optimal employment. The next one is adequate employment, people who were employed who had only one of the adverse work conditions. And then in the middle, inadequate employment, those who were employed and had 2 or more adverse work conditions, and that's our reference group here. And then we have the unemployed participants, those who are not working but were seeking work, which is the standard definition of the Stats Canada, the Statistics Canada. You have to be looking for a job in order to be considered to be unemployed. And also we included here those who reported being working on the table, because our definition again is those who are working in the formal economy for employment. Those who are not in the labor force refers to those who are unemployed but not seeking work, and students as well. So those who are not eligible to participate in the labor market. So this is a final model calculated for gender, education, personal income, and time since diagnosis. We found that, as you can see here, that relative to inadequate employment as a reference group that were in the middle of the chart, optimal and adequate employment to the left of the chart were associated with lower depressive symptoms, with inadequate employment having similar levels of depressive symptoms as being unemployed or being on a labor market. So, but these findings support the notion that bad jobs are as detrimental to mental health than no jobs, and there's some evidence supporting this notion from studies in Australia, in non-HIV samples in Australia and the US. There's actually a longitudinal study that showed that the movement from unemployment to a bad job is actually worse than remaining unemployed. So this is how significant this could be. So what we know so far, we know that employment and health are related to in mutually reinforcing ways. We know that employment seems to be associated with greater difference in physical and mental health, suggesting an adaptation process to the experience of unemployment. That we also are beginning to understand how other components of the psychosocial work environment may also have an impact on health. And from other studies that we've done, once you're out of the labor market, earlier employment seems to be better than delayed employment, not only in terms of the ability to be more successful at getting back into the workforce, but also for the health benefits associated with that going back to work. There's a lot that we need to learn. We know very little about the intersections with other determinants of health. We really have no clear understanding on what role employment might play or may not play in prevention, for example, prevention of HIV transmission. We don't really know if employment could be considered an effective health intervention. We don't really have a good sense of what's the relationship between employment and adherence, access to healthcare and social services. We still don't know a lot about the interplay between medical, financial, psychosocial, and vocational factors predicting return to work on job retention. And this is we're trying to get CIHRRC funded to look at this issue in more detail. And we know next to nothing about what are the potential impacts of changes in employment policies or provision of services, of employment services, and how these changes may also have an impact on health and employment outcomes as well. This is just there's a large team of collaborators, a nice mixture of academics, HIV community members, universities, and ACERS organizations. We are really happy that after, I was just talking to Patty the other day, how crazy this business is, where you have to spend 2 or 3 years to get the funding, then 3 or 4 years to get the data, because for anything that has any value, you have to look at mutual associations, and then it takes another couple of years to look at the papers and to develop them. And so we're beginning to, we finally have this data. Everybody's welcome to use it. Just ask. I'll be more than happy to facilitate that. We have some support for analytical analysis at the HTN. We will be really happy to be able to support any analysis that you'd like to see done with this data. Thanks very much.